You never ask for much. You figure things out on your own. You don't complain. You don't burden people. And somewhere along the way, everyone started calling that a compliment. But here's the question no one asks. What if being low maintenance is the quietest way you've learned to disappear? There's a type of person who has mastered something most people spend their whole lives trying to learn. They've mastered needing less. They don't ask for help when they're overwhelmed. They say, "I'm fine," before the other person even checks in. They shrink their needs down to almost nothing and call it strength. And on the surface, it looks like strength. People around them say things like, "You're so easy to be around. You never make things complicated. I love that you're not needy." And every time they hear that, something in them quietly agrees. But underneath, there's a slow accumulation, unspoken needs, unexpressed wants, emotional weight with nowhere to go. Psychologists have a name for this pattern. It's called self-silencing, first identified by researcher Dana Jack in her work on depression. Self-silencing is the habitual suppression of your own needs, voice, and emotions in order to maintain connection with others. The cruel irony? The very thing you're doing to stay close to people is what slowly makes you feel invisible to them. And here's what makes this so hard to see. Being low maintenance doesn't feel like self-betrayal. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like you're protecting people from your mess. You are not broken for being this way. This wasn't a random personality quirk. This was learned. Somewhere early in life, maybe in a household where expressing needs felt risky. Maybe with a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe in a friendship where you watched someone else get called too much. You picked up a quiet rule. Keep your needs small, and you'll stay safe. Attachment researchers call this the avoidant adaptation, one of the primary strategies children develop when their environment signals that emotional needs are a burden. You didn't choose this. You adapted. The brain is always solving for safety, and at some point, needing less felt like the safest strategy. The problem is, you're still running that strategy, long after the original threat is gone. Here's what's happening inside the brain. There's a structure deep in your brain called the amygdala. Think of it as a surveillance system, constantly scanning your environment for threats. In people who learned early that having needs caused conflict, the amygdala begins to associate asking for things with danger. Not physical danger, but emotional danger, rejection, abandonment, disapproval. So the nervous system develops a reflex. Before you even consciously decide to ask for help, your brain has already run the calculation. Is it worth the risk? And because the amygdala is faster than conscious thought, the answer comes back as a feeling, not a word. A subtle tightening, a quiet retreat. Never mind. I'll handle it. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio calls these somatic markers, emotional signals stored in the body that guide decision-making before logic enters the room. Your body has been taught that having needs is unsafe, and so it makes the decision for you every time before you even know you made one. This is not weakness. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. But what it costs you over time is profound. Chronic emotional suppression has been linked in research to elevated cortisol levels, reduced immune function, and a gradual erosion of what psychologists call self-concept clarity, your ability to know who you actually are. When you spend years performing fine, you eventually forget what not fine even feels like. So how do you begin to reverse this? not through loud declarations, not through forcing yourself to suddenly be open, but through small, deliberate recalibrations.
The first step is to name the pattern without judgment. Before you can change a behavior, you have to see it clearly. Start noticing the moments you edit yourself. When you're about to say, "I actually need help with this," and the words dissolve before they leave your mouth. Psychologists call this metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own mental patterns from a slight distance. You're not trying to fix it yet, you're just watching. The second step is to distinguish neediness from need. There's a difference. Your brain has collapsed into one. Neediness is using others to regulate emotions you haven't processed. Need is being human. Every human being has needs for connection, expression, and support. That is not weakness. That is biology. Psychologist Abraham Maslow didn't put belonging in the middle of his hierarchy by accident. The need for emotional connection is structural. Reminding yourself of this distinction begins to quietly dismantle the shame. The third step is to practice micro-disclosures. You don't have to start by sharing your deepest wound. Start smaller. "I'm a little stressed today. I was actually hoping for something different. I could use some help with this." These small moments of honesty are what researchers call gradual exposure, gently teaching your nervous system that expressing a need does not lead to the disaster it once anticipated. Each small disclosure rewires the prediction.
The fourth step is to let yourself be received. This is the step most people skip. They disclose something small, and the moment someone responds with care, they deflect. "Oh, it's not that big a deal. I'm fine, really." Notice that reflex, and instead of deflecting, stay in it. Let the care land. Psychologist John Gottman's research on relationships shows that the ability to accept bids for connection is one of the single strongest predictors of emotional health and intimacy. Receiving is not passive, it is a skill, and you can learn it. The fifth step is to redefine what low maintenance actually means. Being genuinely low maintenance is not the same as being self-erasing. Real self-sufficiency means you have the internal resources to process difficulty and the wisdom to know when to let others in. Not because you're breaking down, but because connection is how humans function. Here's the model to hold on to. Think of your emotional life as a river. When you suppress what you need, you don't stop the water from flowing. You just dam it. And dams don't hold forever. The goal isn't to flood everything downstream. The goal is to flow steadily, honestly, without catastrophe. That means small channels, small expressions, regular release. Not performance, not crisis, just flow. You learned to take up less space because at some point, less space felt safer. That made sense then, but you are not in that moment anymore. And the people worth keeping in your life, they don't want a version of you that asks for nothing. They want you. The version that occasionally says, "I'm struggling." The version that admits, "I needed that." The version that takes up the space it actually deserves. Being low maintenance was never your personality. It was your armor. And armor is heavy. You're allowed to put it down. Not all at once, just a little today.